Good morning. My name is Todd Gardner, and I'm an Assistant Director at the Office of General Services in the Procurement Services Division, where I manage the fleet and fuel teams. And today we're going to give a presentation on the vehicle marketplace to go over some upcoming changes to the procurement process that are going to happen as a result of the expiration of the Negometrics platform. And I'm joined today by Carol Nealis, who most of you probably are already familiar with through using the marketplace. And together we're going to go over the changes, and we're also going to talk about some best practices and tips for completing the vehicle request forms and developing specifications and in conducting a mini bid for vehicles. So
we're not seeing your slides yet. I don't know if
yeah, I'm going to pull it up. I was just going to start sharing the slides now. So, but,
okay, yeah. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So let me share the slides. Okay, should all be seeing the slides now. And so let's take a look at the agenda for today's presentation. We're going to start with an introduction to the vehicle marketplace that will include a history of the different marketplaces, the different versions of the marketplaces that have been in place over the years. And then we're going to go over the upcoming changes, and specifically the changes to the procurement process that will be happening as a result of the platform expiration. And then after that, we're going to cover new tools and templates that we're going to be providing to assist with the mini bids. And then finally, the transition schedule. And then we'll have some time for questions. And so I know we've already received some questions. So as Emily said, if you have any new questions, you can send them to us using the chat feature, and then we'll do our best to get you an answer. So let's start by going over an introduction to the marketplace, and we can start with the question, what is the New York State vehicle marketplace? And you know, the answer to this is that it's a centralized backdrop contract issued by the Office of General Services, and it allows dealers to participate in a mini bid process that involves purchasers completing a vehicle request form, distributing the request to the dealers, and then having the dealers respond with their bids, and then evaluating the bids and making an award. So those parts of the marketplace will not be changing. It's still going to be a backdrop contract with a mini bid process. And so let's go over quickly what's available on the marketplace. The marketplace allows authorized users to purchase a wide variety of vehicles. Basically, you can buy any vehicle from class 1 through 8 that's currently on the market, and that includes cars, SUVs, vans, pickup trucks, and heavy-duty vehicles. The vehicles are classified as either a single OEM vehicle, which is a complete vehicle marketed and sold under one brand name, and that doesn't include a body upfit. And so examples of single OEM vehicles might include a Ford Escape, Dodge Durango, Chevy Express, or a pickup truck that has a standard cab and bed. And then the second classification is a chassis with a body upfit combination, which typically it's going to be for class 3 or higher vehicles that have a non-standard body installed on the chassis. So examples of a chassis body upfit might include a Ford F-350 with either a dump or a stake body, or a class 3 chassis with an aerial lift body, or some other specialized body type being installed on a medium or heavy duty chassis. And then mini bids for chassis body upfits can be issued as a chassis body combination, which is a complete vehicle, or they can also be issued as a chassis only if you only want the chassis, or a body only if you only want the body. And we're going to go over those in a little more detail later on in the presentation. So the marketplace can also be used to purchase vehicles that are either from pre-existing inventory or vehicles that are built to specifications. And pre-existing vehicles have already been manufactured and they're on the dealer's lot, so you can typically get those quicker than a vehicle that's built to specifications. And if the vehicles that are built to specifications are ordered through the manufacturer and built specifically to meet the purchaser's needs. So when deciding, which one of these options to use, you want to consider things like how soon you need the vehicle, and how important it is to customize the order. And we're also going to cover those a little more in more detail later on in the presentation. So continuing on, you can also choose whether or not you want to buy any make model, or if you want to request a specific vehicle. So for an any make model vehicle, you typically would just have a general idea of the type of vehicle that you want, but you don't have a specific preference for which manufacturer it's going to be. So for example, if you want an all-wheel drive sedan, but you don't care if it's a Ford or Chevy or Honda. And for a specific make model, you'd kind of know exactly what vehicle you want. So you basically know the make and the model. So for example, if you know you want a Chevy Equinox, then you want the specific make model option. So let's take a look at the marketplace over the years and kind of the various forms that it's consisted of. And prior to 2014, Procurement Services maintained a series of awards for specific vehicles, and purchasers were required to buy the vehicles that were offered through the awards. So there wasn't as much flexibility in selecting a vehicle. You had to buy what was on contract, and typically you were limited to buying vehicles that were built to spec, and so the pre-existing inventory option wasn't available. And then in 2014, we launched the first version of the marketplace, and that consisted of an online website where the purchaser completed an Excel vehicle request form, submitted it to Procurement Services, and then we posted the request to an online website where vehicle dealers could view the form and then send bids back to Procurement Services. And then we would then tabulate the bids, send them to the purchaser, and then the purchaser would make do the evaluation and make an award decision. So that process, it has the benefit of consistency and being a centralized process, but it also has the disadvantage of a large amount of administrative and manual work for Procurement Services in reviewing the forms, posting them to the website, getting back the bids, tabulating them, sending them on, et cetera. And typically, I think we receive between 1,000 and 2,000 bids per year. So it's kind of difficult and time-consuming to manage all those bids. But then in 2019, we launched the Negometrics platform, and that system improved the submittal and posting of the requests somewhat by using the e-procurement platform. But it still involved the same basic process of the purchaser completing the vehicle request form, Procurement Services reviewing the form and posting it, the dealers viewing the request, submitting their bid through the platform, and then Procurement Services reviewing the bids and sending them to the AU for the final evaluation and award decision. And so although the use of the e-procurement platform improved some of the manual work, there was still a significant amount of work in administering the bids and reviewing the requests and managing the process. And I think typically we get about 30 to 50 emails per day that require some action.
That's correct.
So that brings us to where we are today. And the contract for the current e-procurement platform will be expiring on October 31st, and it's not going to be replaced. So it's, after October 31st, it's no longer going to be available for use. And so as a result, we have to make some changes to the process for distributing, evaluating, and awarding the mini bid requests. And to give you a little background on the expiration, we found out about a year ago that the platform would no longer be supported in the United States by the company that owns it. So although we would have liked to have kept the current system going, it's just simply no longer available to us after October of 2023. And once we found out about the expiration, we did a review of the system requirements and possible alternatives, and we found that there was a limited number of systems out there that can duplicate the current platform without extensive customizations to it. So it was decided to decentralize the process in order to give the purchasers more control over the mini bid process and in order to reduce the administrative burden. And then that would allow procurement services to focus on managing the centralized contracts and to provide improved tools and guidance for purchasers. So the next few slides will give you a summary of the major changes or the main changes that will occur once the e-procurement platform expires. The basic mechanics of the centralized contract are not changing. It's still going to be a backdrop contract that involves a mini bid process. The backdrop contract will remain the same, and the dealers awarded the centralized contract. The dealers will still be awarded a centralized contract, and purchasers will be required to conduct a mini bid for vehicle purchases. So we'll be here to manage the centralized contract and to assist with tools, templates, and guidance. The purchasers will still complete the vehicle request form, and the form will still need to be distributed to the dealers. However, rather than distribute it through the e-procurement platform, the mini bid will be distributed to the purchaser, by the purchaser directly to the dealers, and the bids will be sent directly to the purchasers from the dealers. So this next slide, I think, gives a really good overview of the changes. And I like to think of the process as being 8 steps. Step 1 is to determine the vehicle needs. That's not changing. You have to obtain your internal approvals. That's also not changing. In step 3, you complete the vehicle request form. Currently, the form is completed online in the Negametric system. Under the new process, the form will be an Excel form. So that'll be similar to the way it was in the previous version, and a lot of you who have been around for a while will kind of remember these forms from the past. They're very similar. Step 4, you would create your vehicle specs. That's not changing. Step 5 is a little different. And currently, the mini bids are distributed using the e-procurement platform. Under the new process, the mini bids will be distributed directly to the dealers by the purchaser using a mini bid distribution tool that OGS will provide. And then step 6, receiving the bids. Currently, the bids are submitted using the platform. In the new process, the bids will be submitted directly to the purchaser by the dealer using email. So the bids will go directly to the purchaser rather than to OGS. And then steps 7 and 8 are basically the same. So next, we're going to go over each of these steps in a little more detail and provide some guidance and best practices that we hope will make it easier for purchasers to conduct mini bids and have successful outcomes. And I'm going to hand off the presentation to Carol, who is also our current subject matter expert in the vehicle marketplace.
Thank you, Todd, very much, and welcome everyone to our presentation. I know most of you I've spoken to over time, and a lot of what I'm going to be reviewing in the next few slides is a lot of what we've already talked about in the past. So what we'll begin with is determining your vehicle needs, which again is what I'm certain had conversations about before. So what you need to do is just consider the intended use of the vehicle. Will it be a single OEM or will it be a chassis body? Is it a standard vehicle or an upfitted vehicle? Vehicle class, is it light, medium, or heavy duty? And as Todd mentioned before, is it any make or model, or is it specific? You'll have to consider some of the options that you need that vehicle to be equipped with, such as a plow or tow package, or any lighting that the vehicle may use. And then you have to obtain your approvals, which is something that you do now. This has not changed. All authorized users are responsible for obtaining all and required internal approvals prior to conducting your procurement. Executive agencies and other state agencies also are subject to OGS fleet management, have to obtain advanced approval. For executive agencies and other state entities whose purchases are subject to a review by OGS fleet management, you must send an email of the mini bid request form and any additional vehicle specs to OGS fleet, and you'll see the email address noted here on the slide. What also is not changing is these state agencies that are subject to these approvals need to include their B1184 and their business case numbers. And then OGS, this is so OGS can review the request to ensure that it is in line of the business case and issue the pre-approval for distribution. Next, then we're going to complete the vehicle request form. The vehicle request form will now be available in Excel format in the same location on the vehicle marketplace buyer's information page, which you're all familiar with that page, so this will be available there for you. There'll be 3 different forms, vehicle request forms. One will be for a single OEM for the any maker model, the single OEM for specific make and model, and one for the chassis body upfit. For the single OEM model, this will be used for purchases of vehicles that does not need a body upfit when the purchaser is willing to accept bids from any manufacturer's model that meets your needs. For instance, as Todd mentioned earlier, a sedan, and you don't care if it's from a Ford, a Chevy, it's just a general sedan, an SUV, or a standard pickup truck. For single OEM specific make, this is used for purchases of vehicles that also do not need an upfit, is when purchasers will only accept bids from specific, a particular manufacturer, make, and model, such as Chrysler Pacifica, Dodge Charger, and Ford F-350. For chassis body, this is used for purchases of vehicles that require a body upfit. For example, when the standard configuration of a vehicle is changed, when you're taking that bed off of a standard pickup truck and changing it with something different. A purchaser may select to procure either a chassis body as a complete vehicle, or a chassis only, or a body only. Examples of complete vehicles are listed below, such as a Chevy Silverado 6500 with a stake body or dump body, whatever you choose. 650 being a Class 6 vehicle, a Class 8 chassis with a dump body, or a 1-ton. So Class 5 Ford F-550 would be just a chassis only, or if you wanted a dump body only. And you can choose, again, this is a specific brand, or you can choose any that would meet your specs. Okay, so type of vehicle order for a single OEM. For single OEM vehicles, many bid requests, you have the option of choosing either vehicle built to spec or pre-existing inventory. Consider the time frame that this vehicle is needed in. The question you need to consider is, do you need this vehicle sooner rather than later? I know I've had this conversation with you quite often. There will be 4 choices. Built to specifications only, which means the vehicle needs to be ordered from the manufacturer directly. Lead times that you need to consider, these because they could potentially be 4 months or longer when you order it from the manufacturer. Pre-existing inventory means the vehicle is on the lot and available immediately for you. Type of vehicle order, single OEM, continued. So the buyer can also specify pre-existing inventory, but you'll consider built to specifications, which is what I've always recommend. Use this when you determine that you have more of an immediate need. This option gives you more flexibility. For example, the method of award for this contract is lowest price. Typically, responses for pre-existing inventory tend to be more expensive than the one that is built, which needs to be ordered directly from the factory. This is because the dealer incentives are applied to the ones that are ordered specifically for government purchases, and the ones on their lot are priced differently from retail. So if your type of vehicle order reads pre-existing inventory, but you'll consider built to spec, this gives you the opportunity to award to the one that they have on their lot, even though it may be higher in cost because we advertised it in such a manner. This also tells the dealers you have more of an immediate need by the way it's posted. Very important to consider what your needs are when you select your option. The final option would be built to specifications, but you will also consider pre-existing. Use this if you don't have much of an immediate need, if you have the ability to wait. Okay, the method of award. For single OEM vehicles, the following options are available for method of award. So NA, you would choose NA for leased vehicles, or only if one type of vehicle order is being considered, such as if your request is for a built to specifications only, or if your request is for a pre-existing inventory only. Lowest price for single contractor is used to make an award to a single contractor that can provide all of the vehicles that you request. I don't recommend this when requesting multiple vehicles for pre-existing inventory, as the likelihood of one dealership having more than one vehicle on their lot that meets your needs is unlikely. Lowest price per vehicle. You would want to use this for pre-existing inventory to make multiple awards to the number of contractors to fulfill your requirement, as I mentioned previously. See additional specifications is the final selection. You would want to use this if you have perhaps a delivery deadline that you need it to be met, like if you need it by the end of the year or the end of your fiscal year. Creating your vehicle specifications. Mini bids must include specifications for the vehicle. The specifications can range from being as general or as specific as you need them to be. It depends on the type of vehicle and its intended use. Creating your specifications. In addition to the vehicle requirements, the following items should be included in the specifications. Any non-standard methods and timeframes for issuing purchase orders. The vehicle request form will give you three choices: a one-time purchase, purchase orders staggered over time, or as specified in specs. The one-time purchase is what's most typically used. An example for a PO staggered over time would be if, for instance, you had to order or you're requesting 100 vehicles and you wish to issue a purchase order like within the first 30 days, and then the other purchase order for the remaining 50 vehicles by year end. That would be an example of a staggered purchase order. The other option would be delivery requirements other than the delivery date, if they will be used as a condition of the award. For leased vehicles and term types, the type of vehicle and estimated annual mileage. So if you are requesting a leased vehicle, you would want to include your desired leasing terms within the document, within the specifications document. Single OEM any make model. The single OEM any make model vehicle request form includes an options checklist that contains frequently requested options that can be used to create your specs for the mini bid request, much like what you're accustomed to using now, such as some of the examples below, like air conditioning. Single OEM for specific make and model. So for specific make and model vehicles, the exact make and model and trim level should be specified when you are looking for a particular brand. Any additional options not included in the trim level must be included in a separate specifications document and include it with your vehicle request. See the information in the information on the buyer's page, which is the New York State Vehicle Marketplace buyer's page. There's resources to assist you with developing the specifications tool for your make and model. This will be similar to the vehicle configuration tool that you previously used on the e-procurement platform, such as specific make and model being Chrysler, Pacifica, and your trim being the Touring L. For the Ford F350XL, your make is your Ford, 350 is your model, and XLT would be considered your trim. For cars and specifications, best practices. So for cars and sedans, List all items needed for the vehicle, even if you believe that they are standard. For instance, power windows, air conditioning, etc. You review the needs if you need extra key fobs and include them in your additional specifications document. Consider the need for aftermarket items and if they are to be provided by an upfitter. Aftermarket items are considered things such as plows, spreaders, additional lighting, things of this nature, not to be confused with upfitted vehicles, which we'll cover later on in the presentation. If a specific brand is needed, reference them and indicate them in your specifications and whether a substitute will be allowed. For instance, if you are requesting or if you have in your spec document a Fisher 8-foot V-plow, and if you, an alternate will be considered, you simply would just need to put or equal next to that item in your specifications document. This will tell the dealers that you are, what your example is, what you're kind of looking for, but you'll take an or equal. Best practices for vans. For passenger vans, identify how many passengers the vehicle is required to accommodate, including the driver. Minivans accommodate up to 8 passengers. Full-size vans will accommodate 12 and up to 15 passengers. It is very important to note if the vehicle is to accommodate 15 passengers, as the wheelbase will change from a 12-passenger to a 15-passenger. So it's very important to note if, in fact, you need 15 passengers for that vehicle. Consider whether rear air conditioning will be needed. This is also very important to identify for larger passenger vans, as this is not typically a standard option and is very important. Additionally, for vans, you need to consider if aftermarket items are needed to be provided by an upfitter. Does it need to have wheelchair accessibility? If it's a cargo van, is shelving needed? If specific brands are needed, please reference them and indicate whether a substitute will be allowed. You'll hear me say that throughout because it's very important that your requests mirror your specs. They need to be consistent. If you, on your vehicle request form, if you say you want a Ford specifically, but your specs say or equivalent, you need to be consistent with your specs versus your request form. Okay, so best practices for pickup trucks. To consider the size that you need. Is it going to be a 1/2 ton, 3/4, or 1 ton? And you'll see the class, we've kind of noted the class next to it because I know that that's always been a question, not understanding, you know, what class vehicles these are. You're going to need to know how many people does this vehicle need to accommodate, so you'll need to specify your cab type. And then the box size for a standard pickup truck. Will it be a short box or a long box? Typically your short box range from 5 feet to 6.5 feet, and your long box typically is around 8 foot long. For pickup trucks, standard pickup trucks continued, these are just standard, not upfitted. If a plow or tow package is needed, please be sure to include this in your specifications if you know that this truck will be used for plowing at any time. Because if that truck is not equipped with a plow package and you put a plow on it, it will void the warranty. Consider the need for aftermarket items and if they are to be provided by a particular upfitter. If so, it should be noted within the specifications document. Again, if specific brands are needed, please reference them and reference if substitutes will be allowed.
I think this is a good place to mention too the cutoff between single OEM pickups and chassis body upfits, just to remind people.
Absolutely,
again, right?
That was my very next blurb here. Because chassis body, as you all know, we've talked about this quite a bit. When to determine if it's a single OEM or a chassis body outfit, and how to determine between the two is when you take the standard pickup truck and you're removing the back of that off and you're going to replace it with something different, such as a dump truck, like a dump body, a service utility body, such as knapheide or redding, or you're simply going to make it a box truck like a U-Haul truck, right? So you're going to take it can even be a van. You can change the configuration of a van because then that becomes like a cutaway. So that's the determination, is when you know you're changing the configuration, taking the standard box, short box or long box off and replacing it with something different. So again, as I've mentioned previously, you can request a chassis body as a complete vehicle, or as a chassis only, or a body only. So for chassis body vehicles, specifications must provide a separate document. It's very important with chassis body outfits that we provide a separate specifications document to outline all the requirements for both the chassis and the body. As these are very complex requests, as much detail as possible should be provided to the dealer so that they can quote you and provide you with the vehicle that will meet your requirements, so that when it's delivered to you, it's turnkey, you turn and go. And again, listed below, you will see what are considered complete vehicles and what are considered just chassis and body only. And again, for a chassis, for a complete vehicle, you just want to consider, what is its intended use? What are you going to be using it for? You're going to need it for plowing, for hauling, different things to consider when to put in your specs for your chassis. Some examples are listed below for consideration. Again, for the complete vehicle, consider, what kind of body you're going to put on here. Is a dual rear wheel needed? I know that that is something that, you and I have talked about quite a bit. When I look at some specs and I don't see that, I do ask that question. So it's very important for you to consider those things when you're putting your specs together. Consider aftermarket items, whether specific brands, again, are needed or if equivalents are acceptable. And I did mention, or I haven't mentioned, but if there's ever a time that you have a sketch or a picture that you would like to provide with your specs, that's also very helpful to include if you have them readily available for you. So for chassis only, you got to consider the requirements for that chassis. Again, just some of the examples listed below. Determine the size that you need. Right? Typically, they're based on the maximum loaded weight of the truck using the GVWR, which is the gross vehicle weight rating. So there are going to be there are some resources out there for you to help guide you in determining the class vehicle that you may need. And we will also have some resources that we'll provide on our website for you too to help guide you with that. What also to consider when you're doing a chassis-only request to include in your specs. If you have an existing body that you intend to put on that chassis-only request, it's very important that you include the dimensions or the type of body that you are putting on that chassis. This will help and ensure that the dealer is going to provide you with a quote and the truck, most importantly, that will accommodate that body, not that you have a 9-foot dump body and the chassis bed from the cab to axle ratio is only 8 foot. So it's very important that you include all the dimensions, as much information as you possibly can about the body that you intend to put on that chassis. And again, if you can provide a diagram or a layout, if possible, that is very helpful, of both the chassis and the body that you intend to put on that chassis. Consider aftermarket components again, whether specific brands are needed or substitutes are allowed. For body only, this works in reverse as the chassis. If you're ordering a body, okay, so what chassis do you intend to put this body on? What do you already have existing? Because again, if your cab to axle ratio on that chassis is only, X amount of feet, and you are requesting a body that will not fit on it, it's very important that you correlate the two and put as much information on, but just note that you intend to put this body on this particular truck. So it all works in reverse too. And again, to include information, as I just reiterated, the cab to axle ratio is very important for the dealers to know for both the chassis only and a body only request. They work kind of hand in hand. You know, so diagrams are also very helpful. So this concludes my portion of the presentation. I hope it was helpful. As you all know, I'm always here to help guide you and answer any questions. So I'm going to just hand it off now to Todd to conclude.
All right, thanks, Carol.
You're welcome.
So, yep, after the vehicle request form and specifications have been developed, the next step in the process is to distribute the mini bid request to the dealers. And then, you know, you have to give them the required time to respond. Typically for a single OEM vehicle, we allow 5 business days, and for a chassis body upfit, it's 15 business days. So we've created a tool to help with the distribution, and it includes a mini bid distribution tool and an email template. So the tools will be available on the Vehicle Marketplace website under the buyer's information, in the buyer's information section. And the basic steps involved in the process involve generating the documents to be distributed, which there's going to be 2 documents typically, using the tool to generate a list of contact emails to send the mini bid to, preparing the distribution email, and then sending the email out to the dealers. So I'm going to go over each of these just in a little bit more detail. So the first step is to generate the mini bid request documents, and when you use the Form A's, we've created a mini bid request tab that is basically a summary of the vehicle request, and so when you're going to use that tab to generate a PDF of your mini bid request, and then you're also going to create a PDF of your additional vehicle specifications document, and those are the 2 documents that will be distributed to the dealers. After you've done that, the next step is to generate the list of contact emails, and so we've created a tool that can be used to generate lists for single OEM any make model bids, single OEM specific make model bids, and chassis body combination bids. So you'll be able to select which type of request you're doing and then generate a custom email list for that type of request. And we're also going to have a list for leasing. After that, you're going to prepare the distribution email. So we're going to have a template available for the email. You'll start with that, and then you'll copy and paste the email contact list from the tool into the email template. Typically, you'll send it out as a BCC, and there'll be instructions in the tool on how to do that. You attach the documents, which is the mini bid request PDF and the additional vehicle specifications document. And then the final step is to send the email to the dealers. I think this is my favorite slide. And so after you've sent the email, the next step is to allow the dealers to answer questions and answers. So if you receive questions from the dealers, the purchaser is going to receive the questions, and they would be providing a response. If the answers result in a substantial change to the vehicle specs or the mini bid, then the mini bid would have to be reissued so that you're providing all the dealers with the same opportunity to see the changes and participate in the mini bid. And then after the mini bid has been distributed and any questions have been answered, the next step is for the dealer to return the bids. They're going to be submitted back to the purchaser, and it will include a mini bid response form, which is also known as Form B. It's very similar to the Form Bs that we had in the previous versions of the marketplace before Negometrics. And we've created 2 versions of Form B. One is for single OEM vehicle requests, and that is used for both any make model or specific make model requests. And then the second form is for the chassis body combinations. So once the bids are received back, the next step is for the purchaser to evaluate the bids and make an award decision. We're creating a mini bid evaluation tool to assist with ranking the bids. So you can use that tool to see who your low bidder is and then make your award decision. The method of award will be as specified in the request form, and depending on the type of vehicle request, it can be based on the New York State price for the vehicle, the total price for the mini bid, or the grand total price for the mini bid. Once you've identified a tentative awardee, the next step would be to verify that the vehicle bid actually meets the specifications in the request. So you might need to request a build sheet or an OEM price list or a contractor published price list from the bidder. And when evaluating the bids, one thing you want to keep in mind is the time frame or the length of time that the bid pricing is valid for. So if you have a vehicle that's built to spec, the time frame is as specified in Appendix B, which is 60 days. And if it's a pre-existing inventory vehicle, it's a lesser amount of time. It's 10 calendar days because that vehicle is on the lot and they're basically holding that vehicle for you. So if you have a pre-existing inventory request, you have to make sure you're doing your evaluation within 10 days. And then once the dealer has accepted the purchase order, the dealer may not withdraw their offer. So then finally, once you've made your award decision, the next step in the process is to notify the dealers of the award decision, of the award determination. So you're gonna basically respond to the dealers who submitted a bid. You're gonna let them know either they were awarded or they were not awarded, and we're gonna provide templates for those notifications. So to try and make the process as streamlined and as consistent as possible. And then finally, after you've gone through all those steps, the final step is to purchase the vehicle. So in general, the specifications for the vehicle can't be changed at this point. However, the buyer can request that pricing be lowered prior to issuing the purchase order. And you may also request that additional options and aftermarket components be either added or deleted from the specs up to a maximum of 5% of the change of the price. And for more complicated chassis body combinations, you can also request a pre-production meeting at your discretion. And so as mentioned previously, once the purchase order is issued, the pricing is firm and cannot be withdrawn. And the purchase order is considered effective and binding on the contractor. So, if for some reason a vehicle becomes unavailable or cannot be supplied, contractually the contractor is responsible for providing a substitution. Or alternatively, the purchaser can elect to cancel the order and purchase the vehicle from other sources, with the contractor responsible for reimbursing the purchaser for the difference in costs. And then once you've made the purchase and everything, you want to complete the procurement record. So you're going to document the outcome of the mini bid. And typically, this will include all the documentation previously mentioned, including like you're going to want to make a record of your statement of need, internal approvals, the mini bid request forms, vehicle specs, things of that nature. You're going to want to justify the method of award. So if you get less than 3 bids, typically you're also going to want to justify the reasonableness of the price. I know on other contracts, we'll typically recommend that people get informal quotes or do some sort of analysis to show that the price that you're being charged is reasonable. And so for the last part of the presentation, I'm going to go over some of the new tools and templates that we're going to be providing. And these include how to use instructions and a buyer's guide and dealer's guide, the vehicle request forms that we mentioned, the mini bid distribution tool, the email templates, and then we're also going to be providing examples of vehicle specifications. So let's start with the how to use. The general how to use document is the first place that I would recommend purchasers start to look for information on the procurement process. It includes an overview of all the steps that are needed to go through the process of using the contract and buying a vehicle. If you need more detailed information on best practices or guidelines, then you would go to either the buyer's guide if you're a purchaser or the dealer's guide if you're a contractor. The buyer's guide is going to include best practices for putting together your mini bids, and it'll include guidance on which form to select, how to develop your vehicle specs, and other information on the method of award. It's basically going to be a lot of the information that Carol just went over. And then the dealer's guide will include best practices for how to submit a bid for the centralized contract and how to respond to mini bids. And then the vehicle request forms that we're going to provide are going to include a Form A for the single OEM, any make model, Form A for the single OEM specific make model, and a Form A for the chassis body combination. And then response forms, which are the Form Bs. So we'll have two Form Bs, one for single OEM vehicles, and that'll be used for either a single OEM any make model or a single OEM specific make model request. And then we'll have a Form B for the chassis body combinations. And then we're also going to provide the mini bid distribution tool. So this will have options for creating distribution lists for a single OEM any make model, single OEM specific make model, a chassis body combination, or a lease. And then finally, we're going to provide examples for vehicle specifications that we think are going to be really helpful. So we'll have examples for things like single OEM any make model pickup trucks, cargo van, or midsize sedan, single OEM specific make model requests, for example, a Ford Transit van, Chevy Equinox, Dodge Charger, PPV, or a couple of different examples of chassis body upfits. All right, and so the last slide that I want to go over is the transition schedule. So as we previously mentioned, October 31st is the last day that Negometrics will be available to us. So the platform will expire after October 31st. That's also the last day to go into the system and get out any data that you might need. So if you want to go into the system, or if you need to go into the system and get out any information on the mini bids that you've done over the years, you want to do that before October 31st. We're planning to launch the new vehicle marketplace website on October 2nd. And so that's the date where purchasers will need to use the new procurement process. And then October 1st will be the last day to submit a vehicle request form using the Negometrics platform. And we're using October 1st as the last day so that we have time to make sure all the mini bids get through the system and are reviewed and successfully make it through. So October 1st is the last day to submit a vehicle request using Negometrics. October 2nd will be the start of the new procurement process, and on October 31st, the platform will expire. So that brings me to the end of the presentation, and I think now we have some time for questions. So I know we've already received some.
Todd, I'm just going to jump in here. We've received a lot of questions and comments regarding the PowerPoint slides. So unfortunately, whenever we've tried to send out GovBuy presentations in the past, because they're so large and they include images and things like that, we get a lot of bounce backs, we get problems with firewalls, or it goes into someone's spam folder and they don't see it. So that's why we take all of the materials along with the recording and put them on a GovBuy website. And we do have everyone's email address, and we'll be emailing you a link to that webpage once it's up and running, and that should be within a couple of weeks. So sorry for the delay on that, but it just kind of works out better to let you guys go and grab the materials rather than try to send out a mass email that you may or may not even get. And with that being said, yeah, we have about 5 minutes. Todd, do you want me to read to you some of the questions that came in via the chat?
Sure, that would be great, Emily.
Okay, and just to reiterate to everybody, we are saving the chat log. We don't have time to get to everyone's questions in the next 6 minutes, but we will have team members circle back with you over the next few weeks to get you the information that you'd like. All right, so first question, is it on the purchaser to verify the vendor is complying with the expectations of the overall contract? For example, offering discount off of MSRP?
Yeah, typically when, once the bids come in, the purchaser needs to review not only the pricing, but the specifications for the vehicle to make sure they meet the requirements of the mini bid.
Yes, and the discounts that the dealers have, the minimum discounts is posted on our website under the contractor information. So if they get a result from one of the dealerships, and they want to make sure that they're giving them the minimum discount that they've agreed to, they just have to go onto the vehicle marketplace website under the contractor information.
All right, excellent. How will contractors be held accountable if they cancel a purchase after a PO has been issued and they do not offer an alternate solution?
I guess it would determine what the reason is. Was it canceled by the manufacturer? Did they just cut off the ability to manufacture that particular vehicle? Because sometimes that happens, and it's beyond the dealership's control at that point. Right, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, contractually, the contractor is responsible for fulfilling the purchase order. I mean, it's effective and binding. So I did have a slide where we covered the options available to the purchaser. I mean, they're contractually they're required to either provide a substitute vehicle, or the purchaser can cancel the order and go out and buy a vehicle and charge back the contractor.
Mm-hmm. That's an option.
Okay. All right. If no bids are received, do we need to do a second mini bid, a rebid, or can we contact any automobile vendor?
The contract requires a mini bid, so if you don't get any bids and you want to continue using the centralized contract, you would have to issue another mini bid. You can't just call a dealer and get a price.
Going directly to one of our dealerships that are on contract, even though they are on contract, will not constitute it as a state contract purchase. Although it is up to if it's not a state agency, it is up to their procurement guidelines as to, how they would, go to procure their vehicle. Whether they, have to submit a second mini bid or choose another method of procurement.
All right. Is there a thought process to acquire another platform like Negometrics in the future?
OGS is looking at different e-procurement alternatives down the road. It's possible that the vehicle marketplace could be included in a future e-procurement system, but I don't think the process has really been started yet, so it's kind of premature to say for sure whether or not it would be included.
Okay. Will the distribution tool assign the schedule of the bid for us, or is that something we'll need to figure out ourselves? For example, will it tell me when I use it that my bid needs to be out for 5 versus 15 days and remind me of the length of time for the evaluation phase?
That would be included in the Form A. There'll be a mini bid due date within the form, and then the length of time would be 5 days for a single OEM vehicle request or 15 days for a chassis body upfit. So it would be included in the Form A.
Okay. Will we be able to see the bids that others are putting in and their results?
If the question is, will you be able to see the bids for other agencies or other users? The answer would be no, because the mini bids will be distributed by each agency individually, so you wouldn't have access to all the bids, so no.
Okay. What if there aren't any bidders that can deliver within the time frame needed?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
What if there aren't any bidders that can deliver within the time frame needed?
Then they don't meet spec. Then it would need to be rebid. I mean, if a date was specified in your vehicle request, that becomes a spec, and if none of them can meet it, then none of them meet spec.
Right.
So-
So your options would be to either do another mini bid request or do an agency-specific purchase or look at some other procurement alternative.
Right. Yeah, whenever you put, you know, a deadline for, you know, your mini bid request, that date becomes a spec that they need to meet, unless you indicate, you know, others will be considered.
Gotcha. All right, it looks like we're bumping up on time here. So as I mentioned, we'll download the chat log and we'll have somebody circle back with you if you submitted a question that didn't get addressed. So thank you to today's presenters. Thank you to everyone for joining us today, and I hope you have a great afternoon.